First of all, politeness. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on when you are watching this video. And second of all, welcome to my channel. I'm teacher Morato, and I'm here to talk a little bit about dystopia with you guys. It's important to remember that we are talking about dystopia concerning a literary reading of a specific dystopia, The Giver from 1993. And because we are talking about literary texts, we have to think literally. Therefore, it's important to speak in this proper language. Whenever we talk about literature, we have to talk in the proper language, because literary texts are all about language. That's why I'm talking with you in English. Second, we have to keep in mind that literary readings have many levels, and one important level is the level of genre. That's what we will talk about here. Genre. First, let's take a closer look at the word genre. The word genre comes from the same family of genes, of genetics, of genealogic, and speaks about families. Genus. And a genus is an ensemble of individuals that have something in common, and that's the idea of genre. Texts that have the same ideas, the same characteristics in common. We can talk, we can read some texts just paying attention on what they have different from others, and we can read paying attention to the similarities they have to other texts. That's what concerns us here when we talk about dystopias. But before talking about dystopias, we have to talk about a previous genre, utopia. Utopia is a genre of texts that have a very specific history. It comes from 1517 with the publication of the first utopia ever known, the Utopia by Saint Thomas More. Yes, I said Saint Thomas More. Thomas More was a philosopher, was an educator, was a man of letters, but he was also a religious man, and he stood against Henry VIII, who changed the British Church in order to adjust to some things against the Vatican, and Thomas More was against such changes. Because of that, he was martyred, he was killed by Henry VIII, and he was sanctified by the Vatican during the 19th century, if I'm not mistaken. Late 19th century, early 20th century, I'm not completely sure. That's why I call him Saint Thomas More. Just a little digression, a little parenthesis to make you aware of some interesting trivia. Saint Thomas More invented this word based on the Greek topos. Is a word concerning a place, and it's no. Utopia is one land that is in no place. This little dialogue between few people discussing the voyage of one specific character, Rafael y Clodeus, concern the characteristics of this imaginary land, Utopia, in which Rafael witnessed some very specific and very interesting things, completely different from 16th century England. Nevertheless, the characteristics of this nowhere place were actually addressing very specific issues concerning 16th century England. That was a very clever move of Thomas More, because he, instead of openly discussing some current issues, he preferred to indirectly discuss some current issues. And talking about this no place, he was actually talking about a very specific place. All the social problems, all the social conflicts, all the religious battles that England was living in the beginning of the 16th century were addressed by Rafael y Clodeus and indirectly addressed by Thomas More himself in this little book. This captivated European mind during the 16th century and the following centuries, creating one new genre. This genre, called utopias, was systematically addressing current issues indirectly. Instead of talking about a real place, authors would prefer to talk about an imaginary place, and this imaginary place would have solved some of the major issues of their own lands. That's what happened, for example, in Città del Sole, the City of Sun, by Tommaso di Campanella in 1602. The same thing happened in the Histoire comique, the comic history about the empires of the sun and the moon, by the French writer Cyrano de Bergerac in 1657. The Scottish writer Edmund Burke wrote A Vindication of Natural Society in 1756, and also the very important artist William Morris wrote in the ending of 19th century, 1892, the News from Nowhere. All these books had the same major characteristics in common. They would imagine some place very different from the place the readers were acquainted to, and these places would solve some major issues that the places the readers knew were currently living. This is the genre of utopia. There are many other books, but for a major survey, it's enough. What happens in the beginning of the 20th century is that the nature of political and social issues changed completely, and that turned around the older genre of utopia into the genre of dystopia that concerns us here. What major changes happened during the 20th century? The raising of many very radical political societies and political movements. The Communist Soviet Union, the Nazi Germany, the Fascist Italy, and many secondary extreme left and extreme right as well. And those new different places created in the minds of the intellectuals some different concerns about the future of the world. And then, with the model of the utopia genre describing those issues in a nowhere land and solving those issues in a nowhere land, what many writers did during the 20th century was to warn current readers about current, taking those problems, those issues to the extreme they could get. That's what, for example, George Orwell did in his Dystopia 1984, published in 1948. This is a very clever clue he left for the reader, because 1984, the year where the book was happening, is the reverse of 1948. He was trying to describe the opposite of the society he was living on in order to warn the reader about the dangers that that society could live. I believe it's almost clear for you that it's a major change about the idea of utopia. Utopia is a goal to achieve. Dystopia is the opposite, it's something to avoid. That's the major idea of this twist of the title of the book 1984. The reverse is important to understand the basis of the dystopian genre. The genre would talk about the current issues, but in a reverse way. This drives our attention to the major characteristics of the dystopian genre. The dystopian is almost ever like the utopia, the description, the depiction of a society. Second, the society depicted in a dystopian book is a society with lots of issues, lots of problems. We have to pay attention to which are the problems of this society, which are the issues lived by this society. We also have to pay attention to the current issues we are living in. Of course, every dystopia, as every utopia, is talking about the issues concerning the lives of the readers. That's why we thought about bringing to you the Giver, not 1984, because the issues we are concerned about are the issues from the late 20th century, early 21st century, not the issues of mid 20th century. In describing this dysfunctional society, there are key characters who are struggling against these societies. Which are the characteristics of these characters? This is a very important thing to pay attention whenever reading a dystopia, because these characteristics are key to understand some of the answers the author of the dystopia is proposing for the reader, for his readership. Many times, a dystopian narrative, may it be in a book, in a series, a TV series, or a feature movie, are placed in a very far away future. Don't let you be tricked, because this faraway future is something about nowadays. I open this presentation to you with a very interesting meme, this one. The idea of this meme is better understanding how we can relate and how we can also expand some current issues to other ones. It's true, if George Orwell were majorly concerned about 1948 issues, we can also try to figure out which of those issues still concern us right now. And because of that, the dystopian genre also deals with technology. And the technology, which is a major issue from the 20th century as a whole, plays a very important role in almost all dystopias. Pay attention in The Giver what's the role played by technology. And also, there is a very important thing to think about, because if dystopias try to put themselves against the idea of utopia, this narrative in which the goal shows us how to solve some problems, the dystopian genre almost always do not solve the issues. Very often, the endings of dystopian narratives are a little bit gloomy, are a little bit sad, a little bit blue, because the dystopians are usually very disenchanted with the possibility of changing something. But do not fool yourselves with this also generic characteristic, because the genre dystopia, since it puts itself against utopia, has this tendency of be a little bit disruptive, a little bit disenchanted, but also we can read dystopian narratives against the grain. What do I mean? We can read the sad ending against the intention of the author himself, and understand that the sad ending has a ironic. When I say ironic, I'm always thinking literally about irony. It's saying something and meaning the complete opposite of it. So the sad ending of dystopias can make us aware for the limitations that those previous answers have, and open our eyes to something different, something new, something we can imagine differently from the dystopian ending. I hope this video was a little bit helpful for you, and you can get to the dystopian narrative you are dealing with a little bit more tools to understand them, and try to read mostly as a genre, as a kind of text that follows some rules, and because of that deals with some previously set up ideas.